Titans on the beat.
What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nati with another video for the channel. Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone. And you know, it's been a pretty good Wednesday, right? Just pretty quiet Wednesday. Nothing happened. Wasn't too busy. Just making some videos, but nothing going on, right, with our sports teams. I just wanted to start this video by by mentioning that you know, we still gotta keep this train moving when it comes to these preview videos, even with all the news breaking every single day with this Washington football team, it seems. But let's have at it. Once again, as we have every single week, I will be giving you guys a preview of the upcoming matchup for this week. For the Washington football team, it will be up against the Los Angeles Rams at home. And without further ado, let's get started. So with Washington, I first want to, as I do every single week, get started with the notable injuries for both teams. And for Washington, a lot of these injury reports come from Washington football reporter John Kine, which I know a lot of people know by now, and his excellent reporting. So for the positives for Washington's injuries, it's actually better than in previous weeks, if you can believe it. Like, I remember in previous weeks, we've had so many names on the injury report and so many questionable statuses leading up to that week's game. So I guess that's a positive. The negative, we still do have a lot of names on the injury report. In terms of players that did not practice on Wednesday, Marcus Ball, the tight end, did not practice. It wasn't really injury related, but he wasn't there. A big deal here. And Terry McLaurin, our stud wide receiver, he also did not practice. He was suffering from a thigh injury, but from what I've heard, he should be ready for Sunday's matchup. But that's still a little bit alarming, right? For a guy like that, of that caliber, to not practice. Dontrell Inman and Steven Sims also did not practice, and Chase Young did not practice as well with the groin injury that he's still recovering from. The last couple of weeks he's pretty much recovered from, and that's also pretty worrisome because I've heard that he is a coin flip at this point to play on Sunday. So him on that defense would be huge, you know, to sort of combat the aggressive offense that Los Angeles has and stuff, but I still think Washington's defensive line will be good regardless. Greg Stroman, the kick returner that we saw late last week after Steven Sims was actually out for the game, and we saw Stroman pretty much handle the kick return duties and stuff. He was injured as well in last week's game, so I don't know who we have as a kick returner. Maybe Isaiah Wright? I don't know. Stroman did not practice on Wednesday. Wes Schweitzer also did not practice with an elbow injury, and he is technically our starting guard at this point, one of our starting guards. So that'll be a big loss if he doesn't play on Sunday, but we should know more about his status come Friday, of course, with him and also with all the other players as well. And in terms of players that were limited, it was just Jonathan Allen with a knee injury. I think he should be ready to go for Sunday. And everybody else was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. So again, that's good news. We don't have as lengthy of an injury report as we've had in previous weeks. And with the Los Angeles Rams, I had to research a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper into the Rams local beat reporters and stuff to find these injuries and deliver them to you guys in this video. Micah Kaiser, their linebacker, who's been suffering with groin and pec injuries. Kenny Young, another one of their linebackers, and tackle Bobby Evans did not practice on Wednesday. Safety Jordan Fuller and running back Cam Akers, though, should be ready to go according to head coach Sean McVay. So that's a plus for the Rams and their secondary and also their running back core as well, because I know I'm very familiar with their running back by committee approach because I've had different Rams running backs over the last couple of weeks in my fantasy leagues and all my fantasy teams. So outside linebacker Terrell Lewis also could possibly be activated this week, and he's been dealing with a knee injury up until this point, but that's again positive news, right, for him to potentially be active this week against Washington. But Los Angeles as a whole are pretty healthy coming into this week, so that's definitely a plus for them and definitely an advantage that they have at this point. And then some other logistics about the game, as we do every single week, as we dive into every single week. The game will be shown on Fox at the same nice 1 p.m. Eastern time slot that Washington football fans I know appreciate, but might be a little bit tough on the West Coast at the 10 a.m. start time. But the game will be played at FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland. But as we saw last week against the Ravens and as we saw against the Eagles a couple weeks prior, there will be no fans in attendance. So technically it's a home game, but there's no fans, so there's no true home field advantage during the game. And right now, the odds makers now have Los Angeles as a 8.5-point away favorite against the Washington football team. And I know I sound like a broken record when I say this, but I do think the margin will be much, much smaller than that. And I actually think Washington has a legit chance of winning the game. And I'll mention that later on when I get into my actual predictions for the game. And then now, again, as we do every week, I'll get into a mini recap of last week's games for both the Washington football team and the Los Angeles Rams as part of this Last We Saw Them segment that we have every week. So with Washington, first and foremost, you know how I mentioned it was pretty quiet today for the Washington football team? Yeah, of course I was lying. Dwayne Haskins, the starting quarterback for the Washington football team the last 4 games and even a couple starts last year, was benched earlier Wednesday morning by Coach Ron Rivera and crew. And this makes sense, right? In terms of his performance, he hasn't really played well over the last couple of weeks. I know a lot of people, especially a lot of stats people, are going to look at his production from last week and be like, oh shoot, he did get his first 300-yard game. I mean, that's improvement for him, but at the same time, you got to realize, as I mentioned in my immediate reaction video to the Dwayne Haskins benching, a lot of those yards came off of easy, quick throws, you know, maybe checkdowns, and a lot of those checkdowns came towards the end of the game when Baltimore was already was in command and they had the lead and they weren't going to give up the lead. So it came a lot in garbage time. So Haskins sort of buffered his stats there and pretty much had done that the last 3 games really, because we've fallen to big deficits over the last couple of weeks. And his touchdown interception ratio is 4-3, right? He has 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions up to this point. I know he has rushing touchdowns as well, but I don't know. The eyeball test doesn't really make Haskins out to be a great franchise quarterback at this point. He might maybe develop into that down the line, but I know, as I saw on Ron Rivera's press conference today, he wants to win now. He wants to win in a division that is very winnable at this point, and I feel like, and he feels like, of course, Allen gives them the best chance, and they just got to stick with it. Ron Rivera is sort of rolling the dice, but you just got to stick with it at this point. Outside of Haskins, the team as a whole suffered a disappointing but expected 31-17 loss against the Baltimore Ravens last week. And the loss was by no means entirely on Haskins, right? The week before, I would place most of the blame on Haskins in terms of losing against that Browns offense and defense and not really playing up to par, throwing a bunch of picks, and I think having 4 turnovers total just by himself. But yeah, last week's game was really just the whole team losing effort. Defense couldn't really contain the Ravens offense, and that was pretty evident by Lamar Jackson's 50-yard touchdown run. That was absolutely absurd early in the game. You saw miscues by guys like Landon Collins, Troy Apke, and others that just can't happen. Been happening week in and week out, and it has to stop in order for Washington to actually win more games this year. And the Washington offense as a whole, outside of stud rookie Antonio Gibson and scary Terry McLaurin, did not play well. You really only have 2 key cogs on that offense, and everybody else is just not good or not playing up to like what you want to see out of them at this point in the season. So Washington's offense has to improve, and I think Kyle Allen, as I mentioned a little bit later in this video, once again, will actually improve this offense. I really believe that. And this has really been a trend. This whole offense sucking every single game has really been a trend to start the season, and it's a big reason why the team is 1-3 at this point, even though they're technically, I don't know how, they're technically second still in the NFC East at this point. So again, very winnable division. So it'll be interesting to see though what the Washington offense in particular looks like with the new quarterback Kyle Allen at the helm. And I think it actually, again, as I'll mention later in this video, will be more to the liking of Scott Turner. I think Kyle Allen is Scott Turner's type of quarterback, and I think, you know, a lot of people forget this. Last year, Kyle Allen, I know he was a turnover machine towards the end of the season, but at the beginning of the season, the Panthers were riding a hot streak with him at quarterback, and everything was going well with that offense. I know they had McCaffrey at running back, obviously, which helps a lot, but Kyle Allen held his own in his first start, right? Last year, he had 260 yards and 4 touchdowns, and I think it was like 19 for 26. So I'm not expecting him to put those kind of numbers up in his first start this year, but he's capable. He's a capable player, and we'll see what he got on this Sunday. And then with the Rams, meanwhile, they're coming off of a solid win against the Giants and are now 3-1 and also in second place in their division, but albeit in a much tougher division. The Rams offense wasn't spectacular by any means. Jared Goff only having 200 yards and a touchdown, and Cooper Kupp leading the team with 5 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. But the Rams defense did play lights out, and they pretty much had 5 sacks against that Giants offense and a pick, along with giving up 0 touchdowns to that offense last week. So their Rams defense was very, very solid last week. And it'll be interesting to see if the Rams can carry their winning momentum into this week's matchup versus Washington, and if their offense can step up to the challenge against Washington's defense, who, as I mentioned earlier, even without Chase Young, he might play, and that might give them the added boost that they need. But even without Chase Young, their defensive line is very stout, and their defense as a whole is pretty solid. So I know the point totals the last couple of weeks haven't shown that, but I still believe in this Washington defense. I still believe in the talent that they have. So Rams better improve on offense in order to win the game, in my opinion. And with the key positional battles, as I get to in every part of these weekly preview videos, I will first dive into the Washington defensive line versus Los Angeles offensive line. Washington, as we say every single week on this channel, fields one of the most talented defensive lines in the NFL, even without my Ioannidis and even without perhaps Chase Young this week. Really been aided by the progression of Montez Sweat, who's just been a beast this season. We saw flashes of it last year, but he's just on another level this season, and he was a first-round pick, and he's showing why he was a first-round pick at the beginning of this season. And then Los Angeles offensive line, meanwhile, though, much like Baltimore's last week, is actually the third best overall offensive line according to Football Outsiders at the moment, and that really shows you the strength of that line. And they're also led by veteran leader Andrew Whitworth, who's protecting Jared Goff's blind side, of course, and he's still solid at his advanced age of 37, 38 years old. He's still playing solid ball. So yeah, their offensive line is no joke. So this matchup should be interesting to see, as it has been with previous offensive lines that Washington has faced against, because they faced against some pretty stout offensive lines in these 4 games. And it would be made even more interesting if Chase Young could some way, somehow suit up on Sunday and really add that necessary boost to that Washington defensive line. And then with the second matchup, I'll be diving into the Los Angeles wide receivers versus Washington cornerbacks. So the Rams feature a solid group of receiving options led by 2 1,000-yard receivers in Cooper Kupp, who plays primarily in the slot, and Robert Woods, who plays primarily on the outside. And they also have solid depth at the position as well, with guys like Van Jefferson and Josh Reynolds. I know Jefferson, Sean McVay said a couple days ago that he wants to get him more involved in these games. So maybe look out for him in this week's game. And they always seem to be open across the field because of the head coaches, who is the de facto scheme caller, play caller, whatever you want to call it, Sean McVay, who is the 4th-year head coach in Los Angeles, but was once upon a time the offensive coordinator in Washington. So we're very familiar with him being able to scheme up very powerful offenses, and he has another good group of talent on that offense, and also can scheme up very well open guys down the field. But the Washington cornerback group isn't too shabby, though. It has only allowed 1 receiver to get more than 68 receiving yards this season, and it's led by, of course, cornerback Kendall Fuller, who had 2 interceptions last game, played lights out, along with Fabian Moreau, Jimmy Moreland, Ronald Darby, and even Cameron Curl, who's played a large part of his time as the de facto nickelback. And that's really cool, right, for a 7th-round pick to step in there and really show what he's got. And Cameron Curl has pretty much done that in the last couple of games. And this is especially when not factoring in the coverage abilities of that safety group that we're all too familiar with here in Washington, with Landon Collins, Troy Apke, and all. Collins might be a great guy in the box and stuff. Both of those guys are not great in coverage at this point in their careers. So yikes there, but that cornerback group is very solid. So this should be another fun matchup to watch this upcoming Sunday. And then last but not least, I usually try to get into matchups between position groups on 2 teams, but I'm going to get into the matchup between Washington wide receiver Terry McLaurin and Rams cornerback Jalen Ramsey. And this is, of course, if Terry McLaurin plays, which I expect at this point he will. This is the best matchup of them all, in my opinion, for this week's matchup. And we're pitting an all-pro cornerback and arguably the best cornerback in the league in Jalen Ramsey up against a up-and-coming but super elite wide receiver, perhaps top 10 receiver at this point in Terry McLaurin. I usually predict matchups that are the largest determinants every single week to whether Washington will win or lose, and I think this matchup may be it, honestly. If Jalen Ramsey can some way somehow slow Terry McLaurin down and maybe get him under 75 receiving yards, the Rams have a very good chance of winning the game, especially because Terry is oftentimes the primary offensive weapon and perhaps even the only offensive weapon outside of Antonio Gibson on a week in and week out basis. So yeah, that's going to be a big thing that the Rams definitely need to consider coming into this week's matchup. And if Ramsey doesn't, though, and McLaurin has that typical scary Terry type of game and goes off, which he could possibly do because he has done that in the past against very, very solid cornerbacks in this league. Washington has a tremendous chance of winning the game, in my opinion. If that happens, they have a legit chance. They really do. Despite that 8.5 underdog line that Vegas is setting right now, I still think Washington does have a good chance of winning, especially if Terry McLaurin goes off, of course. And then last but not least, we get into my predictions for the game. Including my score prediction and my final thoughts. Ultimately, I believe Washington's defensive line will once again be able to hold its own against this stout Rams offensive line, even without Chase Young, as we've seen last week, and I think we'll continue to see. I think the Rams receiving group and Rams passing attack as a whole, while putting up some numbers in this week's matchup, I think they will be limited a touch by that Washington secondary, much like the Giants did last week, right? The Giants secondary isn't that great. It's probably middle of the pack at best, and Washington has an even better secondary, so I think Washington does have an advantage there, and maybe not stopping that offense in Los Angeles, but maybe limiting them a bit. Scary Terry, in my opinion, should have another solid game because at this point he's shown that he's pretty much matchup proof even when he's played against the top cornerbacks in this league. I believe that the Rams defensive line, led by arguably the best player in the league in Aaron Donald, will have a very good game against Washington's offensive line, and that offensive line in Washington is very subpar, so they gotta find some way to give Kyle Allen better protection this week, or it's going to be a very, 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 very long Sunday for the Washington football team. And maybe most surprising of all these predictions, I actually believe new Washington starting quarterback Kyle Allen will have a better game than any of the ones that Dwayne Haskins has put up so far this season. Allen might throw an interception or maybe lose a fumble, but I still think the Washington offense will run much, much smoother than it has in previous weeks with Dwayne Haskins at the helm. And it hurts me to say because as a fan, I want to see that hometown product be very successful for the hometown team. But at the same time, I just think Kyle Allen will have a pretty good game this week. I really believe that. So having said all that, it should be a good game to watch on Sunday. Fingers crossed, right? Good game. And I'm interested to see if Washington can win the game as a huge home underdog once again, or if that stout Rams team could some way, somehow pull out another W in this very peculiar season. And before getting into my final prediction, I do want to preface by saying I am 4-0 with these predictions so far this season for the Washington football team in terms of determining whether they're going to win or lose a given game. I'm not saying that to toot my horn or anything. I'm just saying that because there's just a bit, right, a legitimacy to these predictions, and much more than in previous years, I'll admit that. So at this very moment, this might again surprise a lot of people, but I actually have Washington pulling out the upset win 24-21 this week. I know. It's kind of shocking, right? For me, especially because I'm very timid, very cautious with these expectations. But I think this game ends up being kind of similar to the Rams game against the Giants last week, albeit a little bit higher scoring, but specifically in terms of how the Giants kept it close. And I think the improvement at quarterback in Kyle Allen, who I know, again, had way too many interceptions last year, but a lot of people seem to forget, did lead that Panthers team to a very hot start at the beginning of the season and did have an amazing game right out the gate, as I mentioned earlier, with that 260-yard, 4-touchdown game, and had several of those last season, as well as several dud games, of course, with like 4 interceptions, which is a possibility, right? And could change the game, of course. But Washington also has weapons in Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, who are no joke at this point. They're both capable, and both are likely to get over 1,000 total yards each, respectively, right, this season. So I think all those guys will make the difference. I really believe that. If Dwayne Haskins, I'll admit this, if Dwayne Haskins was starting this week, I would have predicted the Rams win. But at this point, I just see Kyle Allen as being the better fit in Scott Turner's offense. Kyle Allen might not project as the better quarterback over the next 3-4 years. That is a possibility, but maybe a slight possibility at this point. I still believe he is the better fit at this point for the Scott Turner's offense here in Washington, that Air Coryell offense that relies on quick reads. And Kyle Allen is very good at finding the open guy down the field, albeit also being a turnover machine at times. But again, if he does, then Washington's guaranteed going to lose, but I just don't believe that's going to be the case this week, even against that stout Rams defense. So Washington, again, I have them pulling out the upset win, and they also have a good record against the Rams as of late. They, I believe, won the last 2 times the two teams have met up, so that's definitely something that is in Washington's favor. I know both of the teams are completely different. The Rams had Todd Gurley, I think, the last time we faced each other, and Washington's offense is completely different than what it was before. But yeah, I'm gonna stick out my chest a little bit and say Washington will some way, somehow pull out the upset win this week. I'll probably be wrong, but it is what it is. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I think that's going to wrap up the preview. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the DMV Sports Zone YouTube channel as we try to post fire content as much as possible on here and on our Instagram page, all lowercase DMV Sports Zone, and our Twitter page at DMV Sports Zone. So thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the new logo for the channel, the new look, and I'll be pretty much updating all of our platforms with that logo soon to come. So yeah, thank you guys again so much for watching, and hopefully we get a good one on Sunday. Hopefully. Peace.